What are you going to do for me?
Sure.
What are you going to do for my family?
But when you're out, doesn't that depress you? Because you want to articulate your policies like any other party leader, and just, do you ever just stare at this kind of, do people just glaze over and you just think, well, it's almost like, the dice are loaded.
No. Well, no, sorry, maybe I didn't express it rightly. I think it's not that people aren't interested. It's not that people don't want answers. It's just I think they're rightly being very demanding. They're not going to accept anymore just sort of the standard promises from politicians. They're not going to just accept the normal rhetoric.
It's quite an exciting time to be in.
Well, I think what there's a quite a hard-headed, quite demanding approach from people, which I think is exactly right. They feel they've been slightly duped in the past, they feel they've been utterly betrayed in the expenses scandal, and they know they need help. They need help in this recession. So they want answers. They don't want just what are you going to do, they want to know how you're going to do it. They want to know how you're going to make your sums add up, they don't want to know what difference it's going to make to them. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's a really, really good thing, because I think that's the way a democracy should work. We, the politicians, should be made to work really, really hard by people, and people should be very demanding of us about, what are you going to do to help us? It's how do we make sure that the youngsters of today don't become the hardened criminals of tomorrow?
Clegg has been particularly outspoken on youth offending issues. He's had his own brush with the law at 16, when he set fire to some rare cacti plants and ended up on community service. Today's prickly problem for Nick Clegg is how to set the Liberal Democrats apart from Labour and the Conservatives. Last time many people voted Lib Dem because they were the only party opposed to the war in Iraq. But this time they're offering qualified support for the war in Afghanistan. So people are asking, what's different?
I think the problem with Nick Clegg and the Liberal Democrat parties is no one really knows what they stand for and who they are.
I think he's too similar to David Cameron in terms of his personality.
OK, well, let's sort of have a look at some of the policy. With popularity comes scrutiny. The message at the debates was do something different. How different do you think you are in the eyes of the average young voter? I mean, even in the leaders' debates, we picked up a couple of quotes sounding quite similar to Cameron. Nick Clegg, the change that works for you, David Cameron, we need change, it's change I want to help, I want to help lead. I mean, and yourself, you've been called Cameron Light as well. I mean, do you resent that?
No, not. I mean, people stick labels on you all the time.
Do you see why people say that? Or?
Well, roughly the same age, roughly the same height. I mean, I think people, of course, people, and quite entitled to sort of, throw labels at politicians. That's fine. I mean, that comes with the territory. I think there are huge differences in values, in outlook. If you look at the thing that I probably care about more than almost anything else in this election, which is giving people a break who are sort of low and middle income earners, and we've got this idea of raising the income tax threshold, so you pay no income tax on the first £10,000 you earn. Now, that's a really, really big idea. It costs a lot of money. We make up the money by closing the huge loopholes that only benefit the very wealthy. If you listen to David Cameron and the Conservatives, the only tax break they're going to give are to sort of double millionaires through inheritance tax breaks. That's a big... I mean, we can get into these sort of intricacies of the policies, but it's a big difference of priorities.
For most young people, one of the biggest concerns is finding the right job.
For someone who's looking for a job for the first time with none or hardly any qualifications, it's so tough out there. I mean, especially now, we're going through this recession, the jobs are limited at the moment, and I mean, people have lost their jobs because of the recession, so they're applying for these jobs that younger people could have applied for and maybe a couple of years ago could have got.
My priority, big time, is to say that for all of those people who are starting to work, if they're young, or if they're on part-time work, or if they're just, on low pay or even on middle incomes, they should be given a break, because, there are a lot of people really, struggling to pay the fuel bills, to pay the petrol prices.
It all sounds radical, but do you think that politics and liberal politics can inspire... I mean, do you think you're the insurgent in politics? Do you think kids that have got the Che Guevara poster up in the, in the student dorms and stuff can look at you as a revolutionary?
Well, I don't think I'm ever going to compete with the Che Guevara poster. I had one myself, look, people have their own posters. Do I think that we are different, the Liberal Democrats are different in terms of an outlook on tax, on political reform? I mean, political reform, everybody now talks about cleaning up Westminster, but I think most people who follow this will, acknowledge that the Liberal Democrats have been going on about this for decades, for generations. Well, Liberals 100 years ago were going on about how we need to elect the House of Lords. And, of course, you've got two old parties, the Conservative and Labour parties, who've been running things for 65 years now, playing sort of pass the parcel with our government. And, of course, they don't want to change things. They blocked They blocked our attempts to clean up party funding. They blocked our attempts to clean up lobbying. They blocked our attempts to give people the right to sack their MPs. It's logical for them to do it because you've got a system which makes sense for them. It kind of flatters them. But no, I'm in no doubt that if what you're looking for is a party that says, now, hang on a minute, these old rules just don't work.
The Liberal Democrats go into this election with 63 seats and not a lot of power. But the polls suggest that things are changing and there may well be a hung parliament. And if this happens, the other parties will have to get the Liberal Democrat support. Nick Clegg will hold the balance of power.
I quite like the idea of a hung parliament, actually. I mean, I kind of feel like... I think a few politicians have said it recently, but especially with something like getting the deficit down, you kind of... I sort of feel like it shouldn't really be party political, and I kind of think that if you have a hung parliament, then there is a chance, that they might, touch wood, actually work together to bring the deficit down.
A hung parliament is not really going to be a productive outcome for any of us, I don't believe, at a time like this, when you need some sort of direction.
I think a hung parliament will result in more political wrangling, but I wouldn't necessarily say that's a good or a bad thing. It remains to be seen.
This election, potentially, you've got a lot of influence. I know you're probably not even thinking about a hung parliament, well, you must be, but certainly publicly, and the polls suggest that you're doing really well.
I'm actually just thinking that I have to get up at 5:30 tomorrow morning to do an early morning press conference.
But if you do have a hung parliament, if someone does vote for you, surely they have the right to know whether you're going to get into bed with Brown or you're going to get into bed with Cameron.
Well, first thing I'd say is that I think you're quite right. People are totally entitled to say, what would you do? What are your priorities? Where does your heart lie? What will you fight for? Whatever happens, whether there's a balanced parliament or not, whether you're in government or not. And I think on that, I like to think I've been pretty clear. I've singled out, because we've all got these great manifestos with policy pledges as long as your arm, but we've actually singled out 4 big changes we want. We want the tax reform, so you pay no tax on the first £10,000 you earn. Changes to schooling, so there's more one-to-one tuition and smaller class sizes, so all kids get a fair start in life, regardless of where they're born. Completely different, approach to the economy. So we make sure all these people in the banks in the City of London who got us into so much trouble in the first place, lend to households, lend to businesses, and fourth, the kind of stuff I was talking to you about, cleaning up politics. And in a sense, that's all I can do. I can only say these are my priorities. The rest of it is up to you and up to the 45 million voters of this country, because they'll tell us, the politicians, what you want. If you don't want any party, if you don't want any of us to have an outright majority, then clearly politicians will have to talk to each other.
But if you're in a position of power, you must...
But what I mean is, I'm not going to be playing... The question assumes that I'll be sort of playing eeny, meeny, miny, mo, because there's going to be this sort of perfect photo finish, and I can say, who do I like? It's not going to be like that, because...
Isn't it?
No, because it'll be quite obvious in the election result, kind of which party is enjoying a stronger mandate from the people than others. And I really, really mean this. I just think it would be just wrong for any politician, I'm not going to do it, to second-guess what 45 million people are going to decide. This election is now wide open. It's very fluid. I can't remember an election since 97 and before that 83, which is kind of so exciting because you kind of feel people are open-minded about what they might do.
In the last election, many students supported the Lib Dems because they pledged to scrap tuition fees. But today, that policy has been watered down.
Now that he's backtracked on it, I think students may look at him and think, well, actually, I'm not going to vote for you because I don't know whether I can trust you to do the right thing for me, given that you went back on your previous promise.
Lib Dems want to abolish student loans and tuition fees, but I don't really think that's going to help me at the moment, in 6 years' time when they're planning to do it.
Well, let's move on to your policy.
Yep, OK, sure.
You won't be surprised to hear we had a lot of emails about tuition fees.
Yep,
OK,
sure.
So let's focus on it. 2005, a vote for the Lib Dems was a vote for the instant abolition of tuition fees, which meant, obviously, you became the natural student vote. This election, if you want tuition fees phased out over 6 years, that kind of only helps people when they're 12.
No. Let's be clear. What we're saying is we have a plan.
And then they have to vote for you twice, and they're 12.
Maybe I haven't expressed this right. I'm not saying you've got to wait 6 years until suddenly your tuition fees go. What I'm saying is that it'll take us 6 years to abolish them in full. So there'll be a benefit immediately. So under our plan, in the first year, if you're an undergraduate in your last year of of your degree, your tuition fees go. The next year we would take the penultimate year of your degree, your tuition fees would go. We would then cap the tuition fees for part-time students so that progressively you move to complete abolition of tuition fees over a 6-year period. So you have an immediate benefit. But what I really wasn't prepared to do was to say to students, and remember, I've got, I think, as many students in my constituency in South West Sheffield as a proportion of everybody living there than almost any other constituency in the country. And I talk to students a lot. I was with a whole lot of students this morning in Cardiff, and what they want is a